Hi, I'm Rebecca. I'm the Psych coach, and today I'm going to be talking to you about banishing people-pleasing. People-pleasing is really easy to do, isn't it? You say yes to things, you go along with things, you do things to fit in for other people. But then what can happen is you can become really resentful because you're so accommodating of other people's needs that you forget your own ones. And that can make you really angry. It can also fuel low self-worth to constantly be doing things for other people and not thinking about yourself. So I will give you 5 tips to help you banish people-pleasing and feel better about yourself and less resentful in the long run. Tip number 1 is identify the ways that you people please. Write a list. So do you people please by giving people so much emotional support? You know, by listening to them endlessly on the telephone, sitting with friends who are, wanting to talk about their breakup for the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th day in a row or 9th month in a row? Do you give financially? Is that way of your people pleasing? Are you always the first person to buy around, to buy people presents, to go overboard with gifts? Do you give time? Do you give lots of time to helping people move in, paint their places, do their shopping? Do you give lots of time that way? So think about the ways that you give with your people pleasing and make a list of them. The benefit of making a list is that when you then engage in these behaviours like giving lots of your time, buying too much for someone, investing lots of emotional energy in someone, the idea is an alarm will go off in your brain that remembers, okay, I've written down this before as a people-pleasing behaviour. Chances are I need to pull back from it. This is probably quite unhealthy. So have that list to hand, keep it on your phone, and over time it will just become automatic that when you engage in those behaviours that are very, very personal to you, those people-pleasing behaviours, you will associate those behaviours with people-pleasing and that probably being a bad thing, or at the very least, something you probably need to rein in. Tip number 2 is understand what is driving the people-pleasing. Is it a fear of not being liked? Is it a fear of being thought of badly? Is it a fear of being rejected? Underneath a lot of people pleasing is an anxiety about something, a fear of something happening. Try and work out what yours is. Maybe it's a whole range of things. Maybe it is being thought of badly and being rejected. But again, write them down. What is my fear hiding underneath the people pleasing? Then what you need to do is spend some time thinking about, can I cope with that happening? And of course you can cope with that happening. It feels really painful, but we can cope with rejection. It feels horrid, but we can cope with people not being pleased with us. It feels painful, but we can cope with people thinking badly of us. So find out what's underpinning your people pleasing, think about what fear it is, and spend some time thinking about whether or not you can cope with it. And it can be useful to play out the scenario, imagining being thought of badly or imagining someone being a bit displeased with you and you playing out, okay, could I cope with that? What would that feel like? How long would it take me to get over? And by playing it out in your mind and mulling it over, you're reinforcing to your brain, yes, I could cope if I had to deal with the worst case scenario. And by knowing that you could deal with whatever the fear is that's pushing that people pleasing, will help to stop you people pleasing, because you know that ultimately, if you stop some of the people pleasing, you can still cope with the consequences of it. Tip number 3 is set yourself a goal. Set yourself a goal of how many times you're going to try and not people please in a week. Or set yourself a goal of how many times you're not going to people please in a month. Or maybe there are particular places and events that you have on a weekly basis where you are most likely to do some excessive people pleasing. Maybe there's a particular thing at work where you tend to go really overboard and help lots of people more than you should. Or maybe there's a family member that you see where you go overboard with trying to please them and meet their needs each week, whereas maybe it's not in your interest to do that. Or maybe there's a friendship group that you see once a month or however long it is, and maybe you're the first person that always buys the drinks, or maybe you're the person that turns up with too many presents, or maybe you're the person that turns up at someone's house with too many food items to share. So have some goals, but often having goals can mean looking at your diary and finding the things where you can set yourself some very specific aims for reducing the people pleasing. Tip number 4 is start small and build up. Like with everything, there are going to be the things that feel easy to you to not people please with, and the things that feel a lot harder to not people please with. Maybe your sort of level 1 with people pleasing could be doing something like not ordering something that someone suggested to you in a restaurant. Maybe it could be not taking a phone call that you really don't want to take or haven't got the time for, but you end up constantly taking. Little things like that can be such a good way of stopping the people pleasing. You know, if someone asks you if you're happy with some service and you're not, stopping yourself from saying, yes, that was wonderful. Do things small and build up incrementally, bit by bit, because that's what's going to give you the confidence to decrease the people pleasing. Of course, you're still going to people please because most of us are decent humans. We like to please people. But I'm sure you know when you're going into that unhealthy people pleasing and that kind of people pleasing that is really fueled by the unhealthy anxieties of fear of rejection, fear of being ignored, disliked, thought of badly. Set yourself some targets, build up big, and all the while remind yourself of the fact you can cope even if worst case scenario happens and you are thought of badly. Tip number 5 is have a weekly inventory, a weekly check-in with yourself. So often it's easy to say, well, I'm going to practice being more assertive, I'm going to practice decreasing my people pleasing, I'm going to practice being more boundaried. But often it falls off our radar. Our lives are busy, we have different things to focus on, different things pull our attention. The benefit of having a weekly check-in with yourself is that you can review how you've done with what it is you've set out to do. And I think weekly check-ins are really useful if they happen at the same time each week and you use your phone as a prompt. So you have, week commencing, whatever the date is, have I managed to decrease my people pleasing? And then you can have a think about the occasions where you stopped your people pleasing and you pulled yourself back from going overboard with meeting the needs of other people. And you can think, okay, well, I did well this week. Or maybe there's been a week where you've slipped back into old habits and you've totally fallen into people pleasing and you've lost sight of the fact you can cope if people aren't happy with you, and you've lost sight of the fact that, you can cope with being thought of badly, and you've gone totally overboard. And that's helpful too, because having the weekly check-in means you won't roll into a week 2 where you've done it, or a week 3. The idea is when you have your weekly check-in, you can think, have I been doing what I was meant to be doing? If you have, great, carry on. And if you haven't, great, now you need to start implementing what it is you had agreed to doing with yourself in the first place. So a weekly check-in, use your phone as a prompt, make notes of the things you've done well, make notes of the things that you haven't done as well, and then review it at the end of each week. Same time, same place each week is typically the most beneficial. When you're putting all these tips into practice, the most helpful thing you can be holding in your mind when you're doing things that you feel uncomfortable with is, this is serving me well in the long run. The thing is, if goals are really difficult to attain, we're often not inclined to do them. And that's why constantly trying to motivate yourself with the thought process, this is in my interest to be doing this in the long run, will help keep you on track. That's what you have to hold on to. As soon as you don't believe that it's in your interest to be stopping your people pleasing, or at the very least decreasing it, you're not going to stay motivated to do what you need to do. So always hold in mind with all these tips, this is in my interest for the long term. So to recap on the 5 tips I've given you, tip number 1 was work out what your people pleasing is, time, money, emotional support, and have that written down so it acts as a reminder for you. Tip number 2 was to understand why you're doing it. What's the fear that's pushing you to do things that ignore your own needs and meet the needs of others? Tip number 3 was to set yourself goals. Set yourself weekly, daily, monthly goals. Tip number 4 was start small and build up to the more difficult things. And tip number 5 was have a weekly inventory where you check in with yourself to see how you're doing to help make sure you stay on track. And overall, hold in your mind that it's in your interest in the long term to be doing things that you find uncomfortable. If you've enjoyed today's video, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and I assure you my channel will give you plenty of tips to help you live a more psychologically fulfilling existence.